Call this budget workshop to order at 8:20 p.m. at Town Hall. Attendance, appointment of alternates. We are all here, so we do not have to do that. So we will move on to number 2, audit presentation FY 2021.
Okay, guess I'm on.
You are on.
All right, I'm Mike Van Deventer. I'm a partner from the Holland Stable. Again, openly responsible for overseeing the audit work for the town and issuing the reports on behalf of the firm. Also joining me is Heather Seaman. Heather was the audit supervisor on the job, really responsible for the day-to-day execution of our audit work. So happy to be here this evening to go over the results of the town's fiscal year 2021 audit. Again, there are a number of reports that are issued with the financial statements. Again, I won't go through those in detail. I have a presentation, cover the scope of work, the audit reports that were issued, provide some overall financial highlights, and then again, we'll make our required auditor communications. So if you can turn to slide 2, in terms of the overall scope of work, again, we did perform an audit of the town's financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition, based on the level of funding that was received and expended by the town, we did also perform both federal and state single audits. We also perform and agreed upon procedures on the end of school year reports, and that's required to be filed by the school district to the state of Connecticut Department of Education. In connection with our work, we do issue a number of reports. The main report is the report on the financial statements. Again, we did issue unmodified clean opinions on your financial statements. I do like to point out that an unmodified opinion is expressed when we have concluded that the financial statements have been fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework and for a government that is established by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Again, so we do provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. We do not provide absolute assurance. We do not test every transaction. We utilize sampling. There are estimates that are included in your financial statements. So again, we cannot provide absolute assurance. In addition to the report on the financial statements, we do also issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. Again, I want to point out in this report, we do not actually express an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations or on the effectiveness of your internal controls. Essentially, during the course of performing the audit, if we become aware of a material non-compliance with laws and regulations or a significant deficiency or material weakness in your internal controls, we are required to include it in this report. So in the current year, we did report an instance of non-compliance with laws and regulations, which related to the school district's underpayment of federal payroll tax deposits. And then we did also report 3 findings related to the school district's internal control over financial reporting. Now we'll run through those on the subsequent slides. Essentially, again, there was a significant number of adjustments that were made in connection with the audit. The overall effect on the school district's general fund budgetary expenditures. Again, the original unadjusted expenditure surplus that was reported by the school district was $23,146. After all the adjustments were recorded, the final adjusted expenditure surplus reported by the school district was $1,507,252. Again, not going to go through details in terms of those adjustments. Some of the adjustments increased expenditures, some of them decreased expenditures. But at the end of the day, that was the overall net impact on the general fund budgetary expenditures. In terms of the overall findings that were reported, and again, these are included in your state single audit reports, and there is some additional detail if you would like to review that detail. Overall, we did issue a material weakness in the internal control over financial reporting, which was really the implementation of MUNIS. So again, the school district did not effectively implement MUNIS. Again, as a result, there was a number of material misstatements that were identified and corrected throughout the audit process. Again, a couple of items of note. There were differences between the amounts that were included in the school district's adopted budget and then the budgetary authorizations that were inputted into munis. There were account coding issues. Accounts were either not fully defined for all expenditure accounts. So again, when you ran reports from the system, it didn't properly group things from a reporting perspective. There were several instances where actual expenditures were not recorded against the corresponding budgetary account within the system that was established. And then there was payroll issues. Essentially, payroll wasn't set up properly to account for the reporting of all employee earnings, employer payroll taxes, employer provided insurance coverage, and employee insurance deductions. So again, a lot of issues with the implementation of munis. Again, I think from a corrective action perspective, a lot of those things were kind of addressed through a workaround in connection with the current year audit. So there are a number of things that will need to be done within munis to get the system running efficiently. The second finding that we reported was a material weakness, again, in internal control of financial reporting, and this really related to general ledger maintenance and reconciliation controls. Specifically, there were certain cash receipts and payroll transactions that were either not recorded or were improperly recorded, and then there was also a number of balance sheet reconciliations that were either not performed or were incomplete. So again, as a result of those deficiencies, there were a number of adjustments that were made and corrected during the audit process. We did give a additional finding, which was referred to as a material weakness in internal control of financial reporting budgetary monitoring. It really is due to the issues in terms of the munis implementation. The financial information that were provided to the former superintendent and the Board of Education was inaccurate, and they were unable really to monitor and evaluate the financial resources and use of those resources due to the inaccuracies in the budget to actual reports that were provided by the business office. The non-compliance that I had mentioned, again, underpayment of the federal payroll deposits. There were two quarters that were underpaid, December 31st, 2020 and March 31st, 2021 by approximately $48,000 and $111,000 respectively. Again, that's a non-compliance with the regulation, and that did result in some penalties and interest on those undertaken amounts. So the thing that I do want to point out again, in terms of a corrective action plan, again, the superintendent has completed and submitted a corrective action plan to the State of Connecticut Office of Policy and Management. A number of corrective actions have already taken place. So again, I would refer you to the superintendent and the corrective action plan in terms of the Board of Education addressing these findings. In connection with the federal single audit, we issue a report on compliance and on internal control at the federal award level. In this report, we do actually express an opinion on the town's compliance with your major federal programs. For fiscal year 2021, the total federal awards that were expended by the town was about $1.2 million. The major programs were the Child Nutrition Cluster and then the Coronavirus Relief Funds. We did issue unmodified opinions on your compliance over those programs, and we did not report any material weakness over grant compliance. When we look at the single audit and the reporting requirements, we did identify what we consider to be a significant deficiency in internal control over the compliance. It did not relate to the two major programs that we tested, but it did relate to other grant programs. So that finding related to expenditures that were reported in the State of Connecticut Department of Education e-grants management system for certain grants were either incomplete or inaccurate, and adjustments needed to be made kind of through the audit process. In connection with the state single audit, we issued a similar report as we do with the federal. The total state financial assistance that was expended by the town was about $8.3 million. Of that, $2.5 million was considered non-exempt and subject to our testing. Again, we did test the open choice grant, the payment in lieu of taxes on state-owned property, the Town Aid Road grants, as well as the Alliance Capital Grant. Again, did not report any material weaknesses over grant compliance for those programs, but we did have the same deficiency over grant reporting. Again, the school district does receive both federal and state grants from the Department of Education and is required to comply with those grant reporting requirements for both federal and state funds. So again, that finding related to both the federal and state funds. So before we move on to the overall financial highlights, again, any questions in terms of the findings that were reported? So with that, I'm going to move on to just some overall financial highlights. And again, if there was anything of significance from a financial perspective, I would include it in these overall highlights. There's a lot of detail within the financial statements, and certainly encourage you as board members to go through and challenge management in the accounting. And but in terms of the overall general fund budgetary highlights, again, your original budget provided for the use of fund balance in the amount of $750,000. The final budget did include additional appropriations of just over $4 million. The majority of that went into your CNR to fund capital projects. So that did result in a planned use of fund balance of about $4.7 million. Your actual change in fund balance on a budgetary basis was a decrease of about $2.1 million. So that resulted in an overall favorable budgetary variance of about 2.6. So you planned a decrease of 4.7, but you only decreased by about 2.1. Overall, your revenues and transfers were about $677,000 more than budgeted. Again, that primarily was driven by favorable collections on property taxes, building permits, which was offset by shortfalls in interest income due to the historically low interest rates. Overall, the expenditures were about $1.9 million less than budgeted, and that did include a budgetary surplus of about $1.5 million that was reported by the school district. Next slide goes over your governmental fund financial highlights. And again, this includes your general fund on a GAAP basis, as well as all of your special revenue and capital project funds. The combined ending fund balance at the year end totaled about $18.6 million. That was a decrease of about $545,000 from the prior year. Of the $18.6 million of fund balance, 10.9 is currently in your general fund. That was a decrease of about 1.2 from the prior year. 8.8 was considered unassigned, and that represents about 21.1% for 2.5 months of your fiscal year 2022 budgetary expenditure appropriations. So again, the town has a policy to maintain that between 10 and 20%, and you're just above that 20% threshold. In terms of your capital non-recurring fund, again, that had an ending fund balance of about $2.8 million, which was an increase of about $499,000 from the prior year. Your capital projects funds has an ending fund balance of about $651,000, an increase of about $142,000 from the prior year. And then all of your other funds combined had an ending fund balance of about $4.2 million, which was an increase of about $43,000 from the prior year. One of the things we typically will communicate is if you have any deficits in any of those other funds. The Family Resource Center Fund was reporting a deficit of about $18,000 at the end of the year. So that deficit will ultimately get funded by future revenues or subsidies from the general fund. Next slide goes over your government-wide financial highlights. Again, the government-wide financial statements are prepared on a full accrual basis for accounting, much like a business, includes your capital assets as well as all of your long-term liabilities. From a user perspective, the government-wide financial statements really do focus on your long-term liabilities. Overall, the town is reporting a positive unrestricted net position of about $8.6 million. In terms of your net pension liability, that was approximately $2.5 million as of year end. That was about 93% funded, utilizing a discount rate of about 6.25%. Again, that was a significant increase in the overall funding percentage, which was driven by the net investment income of the plan assets of about $7 million in fiscal year 2021. Overall, the town does have another post-employment benefit liability. That liability was approximately $598,000. Again, that was about 75% funded, utilizing again a discount rate of about 6.25%.
Mike, you said 75% funded?
Correct.
Okay.
One of the other things I did want to point out was the very successful debt defeasance and repayment of debt. Again, the town did decrease your overall long-term debt by about 3.9 million or 38.2%. That included the defeasance of general obligation bonds in the amount of 2.3 million, as well as again the prepayment of the USDA rural development loan in the amount of 1.3 million, as well as capital lease obligation in the amount of 337,000. So that definitely provide some additional debt capacity. So the last section goes over our required communications. Again, these communications are really required by our auditing standards. The first item here talks about our responsibility under our auditing standards. Although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, they are the responsibility of management. Again, it's our responsibility for our audit procedures and issue an opinion on those financial statements. In terms of the overall plan, scope, and timing of the audit, again, no changes in the overall scope of work that was originally agreed upon. Two 30-day extensions were requested from and approved by the state. Again, those extensions were really to address the issues that were identified at the school district. In terms of significant audit findings, again, we do look at the town's accounting policies and practices. If you go through the financial statements, you will see the implementation of a new accounting standard, GASB statement number 84 on fiduciary activities. That did result in the recharacterization of activities previously reported as fiduciary activities, essentially due to the administrative involvement with student activity funds, with scholarship funds. The GASB standards are basically saying that due to the administrative involvement, those represent governmental funds and not truly fiduciary funds. So that did result in an adjustment to your beginning net position of about $585,000. So again, those funds were always included in the audit or audited as part of the audit, but they were just presented as fiduciary activity as opposed to governmental activity. In connection with the audit, we do review significant estimates and judgments. The significant estimates really consist of amounts, estimated useful lives that are assigned to your capital assets, as well as the discount rates that I have previously mentioned to determine your net pension and OPEB liabilities. Again, we did review those. We did deem them reasonable and consistent with what other municipalities are utilizing. In terms of difficulties encountered in performing the audit, again, significant difficulties really related to delays and additional work that resulted from the deficiencies that we previously discussed. There were no uncorrected misstatements, so any adjustments that we identified as part of the audit did get reported to the financial statements. If we identified an adjustment that management did not want to record, we're required to communicate that to you. I had no disagreements with management. We did obtain a management representation letter. Again, we did not request any unusual representations from management. I usually give the example, if we were unable to substantiate a transaction and we were relying on the representation from management, we would disclose that to you. And I'm not aware of any other consultations with any other independent accountants. So again, that concludes the overall communication from the audit perspective. Again, happy to answer any questions. There is a lot more detail that is included in the actual reports themselves.
Any questions, comments?
Would it be safe to say that if we were looking to obtain some bonds, that whatever company we would work with, we want to see that we have a fairly successful audit, correct? Is that
Correct. Yeah, they definitely look at the financial statements themselves.
And ask me a ton of questions.
Yes, they do.
We get rated every time we issue that.
Okay.
Nicole?
No, I saw the corrective action plan. I mean, I think just everything that we've seen, we've got the plan, we've got those things in place, so. hopefully we'll kind of get results going forward. Thank you for your work. on
Sure. The only thing I will add is, again, there were corrective actions that were kind of taken during the course of performing the audit. I was generally very happy with those actions that were taken. And again, I think the individuals that were brought on did a lot of work to kind of assist in wrapping up and finishing the audit.
Overall, you think we're in good shape and moving forward?
I think you're moving in the right direction.
That's it for now. Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
It's not funny.
Wasn't really joking.
Your budget.
I'm happy to go last. Do you want to get somebody out of here who maybe? like-
They're all you.
They're all you.
Are they all me? I thought the library's on. They're all me. Okay.
They're all you.
Nope, the library is on with the Board of Ed next week.
They're not. I was wrong. Sorry. You want me here or do you want me there?
Wherever you would like to be. Sit all day.
We don't have too many, Jay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll save everybody some time. I just did a pretty granular presentation. If you would like to ask particular questions about any budgets, I'm happy to answer them, but I don't have anything new or different prepared for.
Yeah, diversity. Council, arts and cultural activities, meetings, and legal and capital.
So the first, both A and B are all part of the general fund portion, which is in tab 2. It starts with first selecting, which is obviously Jay's budget, and then goes on to some of the others. In your big. Yeah. All right. Tab 2 is the general fund budget.
So in the budget submission, I did include the typical things, which is kind of a year in review, things that have been accomplished out of that particular office. Explanation of what our cost estimates are for things in the next year. Really, it's a pretty rote budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're short. I don't know what happened in last year's budget, but we didn't budget nearly enough. If you look at the units with the trend of the 3-year, you'll see that we were over it by, oh, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000 last year to what we budgeted this year.
And I feel like we looked at it last year too, and said something like, there was a reason.
Well, the new thing is the newsletters that we're doing, we
The
have to
$5
pay for
twice.
postage.
Well, so that we have to pay for postage with that in circumstances where the ad sales in the community don't cover it. For the first couple, that was not an issue. And they have actually flagged that as saying like the ads are not covering the cost of the production, so we have had to kick in to offset the difference in promotions costs. That is, from my estimation, that's a transparency thing. That's a marketing thing and it's an economic development thing. What we use that for and what I ask staff to prepare for when they submit articles on that is positive stories about things that are happening in the community with the intention that, first of all, I want to make sure our constituency is informed about some of the good things that are happening here. But I'm also mindful of somebody who may be doing a Google search or looking at where they're going to locate their family or locate their business. And I want the things that pop up in a Google search to be positive reflections of the things that are happening in town government and the community at large. So if we have to cover some of the costs of postage for that, I think that's money well spent because I think it pays itself back in those ways.
No, I think it's a great publication, I guess, in college.
Would you like to buy an ad?
I actually have.
No, you haven't.
We haven't recently. but-
I know in our neighborhood, all my neighbors were very positive about receiving that publication.
Yeah,
It's well received.
that's an idea that most of the good ideas that I have come from other places. I borrow them pretty liberally, and that one was implemented in the town of Tallinn. You'll notice that we actually, for the Five Village Voice, it's actually published by the Willimantic Chronicle. We are not in the Willimantic Chronicle circulation area, but they have a service contract that they've extended to us because of our work with the town of Tallinn.
Yeah, in that section. Everybody good with that? Just like interrupt me if you're not. So. Okay, so then it's Ethics Diversity Council, which are really just their recording secretary.
Yeah, and the changes between the department head requests and the final represent just the change in those recording secretaries we talked about.
The Arts and Culture Commission is a little different, so why don't you just kind of
Yep,
explain a little bit about that?
so they're new. First of all, we also did build them a line for recording secretary, but they came to us with a list of different initiatives that they would like to undertake. It's a board that consists mostly of new people, which is fantastic. We're very excited to see that. The folks on the board of selectmen thought that may be, and it was my recommendation to reduce them from their initial ask of 8,100 down to 45. The consensus amongst the board was also that maybe we start them off a bit smaller than their ambitions led them to and see what they were able to accomplish with that and then allow them space to build up over time rather than committing $8,000 for something new when we don't know what the outcome is going to be.
They're pretty good presence.
They do, and they have some really cool ideas.
What's a traffic box route?
So
Right at the end of where we meet 140 out here, there's a metal box
Oh, yeah.
that's about 2 by 1, maybe. That's what they're for.
better example would be
Okay.
right off exit 44. In that area next to where Torco used to be by Walmart, there is a utility box.
Yep.
They're talking about wrapping those with landscape photos or scenic photos from the town of East Windsor. The problem they run into on that is the town of East Windsor does not actually own any of
Those
those.
boxes, yeah.
So that's an example of a good idea that may not be quite ready for prime time yet, because they need to go through, whatever arrangements they want to work out with the actual owner of them before they can do something like that. Another project they were talking about during a mural on one of the I-91 underpasses. Their misfortune is that DOT is actually revamping one of those underpasses, and so it's kind of a non-starter from DOT's perspective. That's the bad news. The good news is we have two. So they've already moved on to looking at the other one, which is the one on South Water Street.
There's a lot of graffiti on that one. And I know they said they were gonna work out some arrangement where the other artists wouldn't be putting their graffiti on top of the ones that they want to put. So I hope that works out.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'd like to, and the thought was, get them an opportunity to get a couple of wins under their belt.
Yeah.
And then see where they go from there.
Absolutely.
But they do have an energy and a dedication that is refreshing, and I want to encourage it.
I think we saw those, wasn't it in Holyoke, Lucy, that Holyoke, Mass has those utility boxes that have artist stuff on it. Looks great.
Another more local example would be if you think back a number of years ago in West Hartford Center, there were a bunch of funky painted cows. Nobody knew what they were for, other than West Hartford wanted to have them. And so, but a lot of people started talking about it, and people started seeking them out, and businesses wanted to have them in front of their ice cream shop or whatever. it is.
East Granby does, right?
Yeah, there's
What are
horses,
those cows? What are
there's
they?
horses in Granby
And turkeys.
and
Oh,
turkeys,
turkeys.
yep. And there's pigs somewhere.
So there's exciting things that they can do, and I think if, given the opportunity, they would welcome the opportunity to come in and visit with you and share some of their ideas, but we're impressed.
Yeah, they do stuff with the New Year's Day, too. And photo finish. I mean, just little things.
We're fortunate that the board chair for the Arts and Culture Commission also works for Parks and Recreation, which is the everything fun side of town government. And they do a really, really good job. So to bring somebody who has demonstrated acumen to this new task, I think is nothing but good.
Okay, so that brings us to 3B, which is activities and fees.
Well, there's a few people that will be on your agendas in later meetings, people that want to come and talk to you. American Heritage, veterans, cemetery. So the ones that Jay should probably talk about are the ones that are our pro rata stuff or our share of something.
Okay, so there are some of these are membership dues. Some of them are membership dues that are based on per capita assessment. Some of these are social service or public health programs and agencies that also work on a pro rata per capita assumption. So I'll just go through. Probate court, that's a per capita thing, and we're part of the Greater Windsor Probate Court. The court itself is located in South Windsor and services the towns of Windsor, South Windsor, and East Windsor. We don't have a choice with that. That is a bill that we will be compelled to pay. We are one of the towns in Connecticut that is part of a regional health district. So we're part of the North Central District Health Department. We don't have a standalone health department. North Central has 8 total towns that it services. They have 2 locations, one in Enfield, one in Vernon. And our per capita assessment is that $52,150. One of the things that I want to point out in terms of some of the per capita assessments versus others is that, so a per capita assessment is a per person charge. Some of those went up, some of those went down. How does that happen, you ask? How can, if it's a per person charge, how can sometimes it go up, sometimes it go down? The answer is what data set you're using. So some of them use the US Census, some of them use DPS's annual census, and that equates for the difference. So the decrease in North Central Health is reflective of DPH's numbers, not necessarily the US Census numbers. Ultimately, what happens is those numbers catch up, but they're a little goofy from year to year. So $52,000, $52,150 is what our North Central charge is. One of the things that we're trying to do a bit more, and this ties into what I was talking about with the 5 Village Voice stuff, is recognize good things that happen. So we have $1,000 in there for recognition. That might be employee recognition. That might be one of the more memorable ones that we did just recently was recognizing the 4 firefighters who rescued somebody from the Carousel Apartments fire in August, or commemorating the long service of Joe Ouellette on Planning and Zoning Commission and Bill Raber on the Board of Education. When you have somebody who's on a board of commission for 20 years, that merits some recognition. When you have somebody who saves a human life, that merits some recognition. And so that's what we use that line for. CCM and CROG are both member organizations. 168 towns in Connecticut are members of CCM. They provide research and lobbying activities on behalf of the town. They provide certain printing resources for us. They provide employee training. CROG is the regional planning agency. That is a source of potential grant funding. They just finished the Route 5 study, Route 5 implementation study. in November. Am I Memorial Day or is that going to be Barton?
We can just do it. It's
Yeah.
flags for the
Yeah, it's
cemetery.
flags for the cemeteries.
And it's never enough money. They use the rest out of their donations.
Metro Hartford Alliance is, they provide a number of services. Hartford Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs is out of there. The Greater Hartford Chamber of Commerce is out of there. The long and short of it is what they do is they're a clearinghouse of sorts for economic development activities. So that is an opportunity for us to get on the radar with companies from out of state who may be looking for not necessarily community specific, but community specific demographics. So, for example, we want to locate a larger scale business in a community that's between New York and Boston. They might go to Metro Hartford Alliance and put out basically an RFP for that. We responded to a number of those. Advanced CT provides a similar service, except there's no charge for Advanced CT. Metro Hartford Alliance tends to have a bit of a broader reach, I think. The Greater Hartford Transit District, that is another per capita assessment. The Cemetery Association will come and talk to you on their own. Community Health Resources, you'll see in fiscal 21, in fiscal 22, we zeroed them out. They are a state-funded nonprofit that also asked for, a municipal contribution. In consultation with the chief of police and with the director of community services, what we were contributing to them was really immaterial. They have an obligation under their state funding source to provide exactly the same services to us. So we took that out of the budget. It didn't make sense to be making a contribution to something that we could get exactly for free. East Windsor Health and Wellness used to be the Visiting Nurses Association, and their submitted ask is simply what they asked for. The Fort Town Fair, last year we were the host community, and so typically the host community pays the $5,000 rate. In the off years, when you're not the host community, that is typically a $1,000 rate. This year, we didn't actually get an ask specific letter from them, so we took the position that we hosted last year, we're not the host this year, so we're going to stick with what the historic trend is, which is $1,000. I will say that they have been having, and it's a new administration now, so hopefully it's a bit different, but they have been having trouble with one of their member towns not participating at all in terms of supporting the Fort Town Fair and actually going the opposite, putting additional local charges on them, and that's the town of Summers. They have had a real string of bad luck with Summers under the Bud North administration. Now that Judge Keeney is first selectman, I'm hoping it'll be different, but I haven't heard that. He's a different guy and he's a very smart man, so I'm hopeful that he'll write that check. North Central Mental Health is another per capita assessment. The Network Against Domestic Violence is an area area nonprofit that provides resources and shelter for people who are victims of domestic violence. Over time, that contribution amount of $5,000 has been inched up, but as you can see, historically since 17, it's been pretty flat at 5,000. This is another instance where they don't actually send us a request for funding. They just send us a letter letting us know that we could put something in the budget, but they don't do a dollar specific ask. So that $5,000 is an arbitrary number, but it's historically consistent. American Heritage River will come and speak for themselves. Melrose School.
Just do the 500.
What does that go to? 4-H?
I was gonna ask, what is that?
I agree with Amy.
Somebody sends us a letter that says, please give us $500.
Was it Randy Dubuque or Ricky Dubuque? I think it was.
I'm gonna send a letter that asks for that.
And then the last one,
Please give me $600.
the last one is the Connecticut Main Street Center. That's another economic development nonprofit in the region. I gave that a trial membership, just to see if that would be something that would work for us. I don't think it did. So we're pulling out of that and redirecting the funding back towards Metro Hartford Alliance, which has a more established track record and probably fits more with what our economic development strategy has been.
Jason,
Yes.
the Melrose Schoolhouse, they use for their parade. It's more than $500.
We just find out, please.
Yeah, we can find that out. I think it's actually probably in the supporting
I was
that.
gonna say, there's not a letter in there.
It's right.
For working
It's
with
not
you.
right.
How to give you a page for it.
We probably didn't have a page.
It's after the Heritage River
It
Commission.
should be in the same order as the,
It was
Line.
line one.
It's just before the IT.
yeah, right before IT.
Oh, I see.
Nope.
It's yet from Memorial Day service, office supplies, stamps, etc. Mailing, annual membership drive, Memorial Day and additional costs.
So that's running your organization, basically.
They do a lot with that $100. In their furnace.
I don't know if this is true or
I'll
not.
read it in hers.
But I will
don't
tell
have
you-
That page.
Anecdotally, the Melrose Parade is referred to as the shortest parade in America. If you have not been to it, they literally go from the Melrose School to the Melrose Cemetery, which is across the street.
Yeah.
They line up, it's a full, a full thing, they cross the street.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's pretty neat. So any other questions on activities and fees? I'll do the best I can.
Thank you, George.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, let's back up. Okay. Legal is, I'm keeping flat. There are a couple of contracts that are up. So the clerical contract expired on June 30th, 2021. We are in negotiations with them. We are not near the end of negotiations with them. So I am pretty confident that will roll into the next fiscal year in some fashion. The other contract that'll be intense to negotiate that's up is the police union. They're up on June 30th of this year. They have sent a demand to negotiate, which is just nomenclature that it sounds much nastier than it is. It really is just a formal letter saying negotiations need to commence. Here are the things that we're looking for so that we can prepare on our side. But it's called a demand to negotiate. So it sounds adversarial to start. It is not. In terms of the general town council stuff, there are a couple of older lawsuits that may have some fiscal impact on the community that are back. And so I would rather just keep that intact in case there's a judgment against us where we need to pay. Otherwise, what the commitment I made to the board, and some of you were on it, some of you are not, the commitment that I made to the board at the outset of my administration was that over time I would rely less on the town attorney as I developed a comfort level. I will report that has happened. The more experience I get under my belt, the less reliance I have on the town attorney for more ministerial things. It now is at the point where I know when to reach out to him for legally jeopardous things, and that's when I talk to him.
Any questions? Capital improvements.
So in the backside, maybe tab 9. Maybe before that, I think that's Board of Ed.
So the capital improvement committee asked for $1.4 million. I reduced them down to $950,000 and the selectmen acquiesced to that. As I talked about, one of the things that we paid off with the added appropriation was an elimination of the need for the lease purchase payments. So some of the $94,660 there was moved to the line above, which was just for CIP allocation. Some of it was moved to debt service. And the
It's tab 5 in the first section.
first time buyer.
The other set is the Board of Ed tabs. It's right after that.
So you're one cap too far, I think.
Tab 5, first thing is debt,
I see. Oh, I
and then the
see.
second thing is capital.
Senior services.
Go to
So
6.
you're in.
Why am I on?
Flipping it out.
Oh,
Oh, it's tab 8 is my debt service.
Yeah, it is tab 8.
Yeah.
Tab 8?
Go to 8. in the first part.
Yeah, sure, right.
Right, now turn it.
After that service.
Got it. Yep.
Can we talk about that service too, or is that not on here?
That's not on there.
All
right,
Should
you
have
could,
actually,
but-
that would make sense. But
I don't know where I have it, or if I have it.
And then you have more detail after that.
So I'll tell you, without violating any call of the agenda stuff, I'll tell you that the strategy around debt service and capital run hand in hand. And there are some longer term, big dollar expenditures that are in our very near future. We know we have to do them. The good news is because of the added appropriation last year, we're in a position where we can do them all. It's just a matter of actually putting the projects together and then going through the approval processes, which would go from my board to your board to a town meeting to a referendum. The target goal is to utilize the gubernatorial election to do that. I'm a proponent, as has been demonstrated. I'm a proponent of using elections, particularly higher turnout elections, as a means of asking voters questions of high importance. So if we're going to be spending, I'll say significant dollars, that really should have the most voter impact and voter feedback that we can get, which would be utilizing the November ballot. In order to do that, all of the legwork needs to be done and all of the approvals up to and including a recessed town meeting needs to happen by September 8th. So I think we're going to be prepared for that. The publicly known larger ticket items we have already initially begun. So I think that is a likely target. That's a doable target. And there's a couple of other ideas that will be coming through the Board of Selectmen in the coming weeks.
Any questions? All right. That was it for tonight because. It was pretty quick. Unless you have any questions of Jason. All right, we are on to number 4, board member comments. Anybody?
I liked both the first selectman's budget presentation and the one from the board, that it was easy to read. We saw some real narrative of what was going on. So I think we were much better prepared than we might have been in past years, just being able to read that narrative ahead of time. So I really appreciate that.
You talking about the budget messages?
Yeah, both yours and Pat.
All good?
Oh, sorry. That's okay, I'm good. I'll just echo Tom. I think that spelling it out for how much, each constituent is paying per service, I think that just spoke differently. Right, when you're like saying, however many dollars it is for public safety, right, that's different than it's gonna be a $98, increase on your taxes. So I appreciate the thought that went into it, and I look forward to see what we come up with.
Great, so tomorrow here, 7 o'clock, again, would be our next meeting. So if you want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll be here.
I'll second. Okay, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Or was it aye?
Who seconded?